Greetings everyone and welcome to episode 9 of the Virtual Office Hours. This is our spring 2016 edition. We took another week off for Easter break, but we're back. Abby Blakeney is behind the camera, our producer. We have just secured Abby for another year, so she will be back in the fall and the spring of next year as well, doing the Virtual Office Hours. So we have some consistency and continuity in our production. On our production team here, I guess, although it's really a one-woman show with Abby, right, in terms of producing. We are coming up to sort of the last segment in this year-long conversation and discussion here at the Virtual Office Hours on the question of, was America founded as a Christian nation? I think we have maybe 4 or 5, maybe 6, depending on how far we go into May, episodes here left. We are, of course, talking about my book, Was America Founded as a Christian Nation? A Historical Introduction, which will be out in September in a brand new revised edition, which we're very excited about. So, as I always say, I thought we would revisit some of these themes. And in the last several weeks here of the Virtual Office Hours, we are going to be talking about the religious faith of the Founding Fathers. Last episode, if you remember, we talked about the religious faith of the Founding Fathers in a very generic or general kind of way. Some of the things that they all embraced about religion. But now we're going to look at individual Founding Fathers, and you may notice I only have one Founding Father here today, but actually manifested in 2 different forms. One is the George Washington bobblehead and the George Washington Pez dispenser, because this week and next week we're going to talk a little bit about the religious faith of George Washington. Now, of all the Founding Fathers, George Washington, or at least the major Founding Fathers, the Founding Fathers I talk about in my book, George Washington is probably the most difficult to figure out. He rarely talked specifically about his religious faith. When he talked about God, he normally referred to God in terms of the doctrine or the teachings of what he called quote-unquote providence, or the idea that there is a God. This God is clearly active in the affairs of human beings. This God intervenes into human life. So in some ways it's really, really hard to describe George Washington as a deist, or someone who believed that there was this God who created the world and then just let it run on its own, on laws of science and nature and morality and so forth without interfering. So he talks a lot about providence. He uses that phrase very, very often in his writings. Other than that, he doesn't talk much about sort of anything else related to sort of Christian theology. He mentions Jesus Christ only twice in his writings, and when he does mention Jesus Christ, it's very rare that he affirms a belief in Jesus Christ, but he just kind of mentions them in passing when he's talking about Christianity. I think at one point he references Jesus Christ's, he recommends the religion of Jesus Christ to the Delaware Indians at one point. So he doesn't spend a lot of time talking about, Jesus, his resurrection, the deity of Christ, these kinds of things. It's hard to find. As a matter of fact, all of these kinds of ideas are absent from his writings. Having said that, George Washington was also a church leader. He was a vestryman in his local parish in Virginia, in the Mount Vernon area there, Pohick Church. So he would have certainly been familiar with the Bible. He certainly would have been familiar with the religious teachings of the Anglican Church. He would have been familiar with the Book of Common Prayer. He would have attended services. He was very, very concerned about the religious, or at least he served on a committee, I should say, related to the religious dimensions of Virginia life. So we do know that he understood 18th century Anglican Protestantism, Anglican religion in Virginia. When it came to the times, though, where he could show or had the opportunity to show his deepest commitment to his faith, namely in the partaking of communion, George Washington really fails in that regard. It's clear from multiple sources that he did not normally stay around after the service to take communion. His wife Martha did, but he often left early. So there's several examples, I talk about them in the book, where he refuses to take communion, or at least simply passes on communion, even at sometimes leaving Martha at the church and having somebody take him home back to Mount Vernon and then go back and pick up Martha. So if we look at communion, or the celebration of the Lord's Supper in the Anglican community, this was a way of sort of identifying oneself as a Christian, and Washington does not partake in that way. One final point, Washington throughout much of his presidency, of course, is a great defender of religious liberty. During his presidency, he writes letters to a large number of Protestant denominations, to the Jewish congregation, the Toro Synagogue in Newport, even to this small sect known as the Swedenborgian Church. So he writes these letters to defend their religious liberty. So he is very, very concerned about religious liberty, religious freedom, and so forth. That's much more an extension, I think, of his policies, though, as president, than his own internal faith. Now, one other big question is, did Washington pray, and specifically, did he pray while he was at Valley Forge, as depicted in a very famous painting of Washington? And in order to find out whether he did or didn't pray at Valley Forge, you'll have to tune in next week for the virtual office hours, when we'll devote an entire episode to that painting and that particular moment in Washington's life. So thanks for watching. We will see you next week on the virtual office hours.